Welcome to In the News with Double O Des. I'm Des Bernardo, giving you my perspective on news from South Africa and the rest of the world.
The story I want to cover today is with regards to Mr Xhosa, who was killed brutally by the South African security forces. And this article is from the Daily Maverick. Now, I know that this event is quite old and the judgment was passed 2 days ago, but I actually want to go through that court judgment and the article that relates to the specific court judgment. So in the Daily Maverick, the headline reads, Collins Xhosa Judgment, a win for all of South Africa against brutality by security forces. And then it has a picture of the victim. I will put a link to the article underneath the video in the description, as I usually do, so that you can look through it yourself. It says here, the Minister of Defence and of Police must draw up a code of conduct for all the security forces with guidelines for their behaviour and interaction with civilians during this time. It's a pity that a court case like this didn't happen before and that many people have had to lose their lives because of this police and military brutality. In a major victory for human rights, the family of Collins Xhosa and their neighbours have won a court application for orders against the security forces and their bosses, and they will no doubt be awarded significant damages when that part of the litigation is eventually heard. But they are not the only winners. Everyone in South Africa has won because of this restatement by the courts of the obvious, that the government and the security forces will be held to account for how they behave, even during restrictions aimed at curbing the spread of COVID-19, and that their behavior will be measured against the standards of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Now, I've mentioned before in many of my In the News videos that our Constitution is still in force, our Bill of Rights is still in force, and that our Chief Justice Mogoeng has made it clear that the courts will remain open during this time, because our president actually wanted the courts to close down. And Mogoeng put his foot down and said the courts will remain open because I believe this Chief Justice is actually still on our side and that he actually believes in real democracy. Collins Xhosa, his immediate neighbour and members of their families were viciously beaten by soldiers over the Easter weekend at their home in Alexandra Township, Gauteng, for what the security forces said were infringements of lockdown regulations. Now, I actually posted that video some time ago on my Facebook group, #ResistanceSA, and I mean, it was absolutely shocking. I actually also posted this on my Twitter account, that at the time, no one was responding to this. They thought this was old news from another era, not during the COVID-19 lockdown. The denying of what was happening at the time among South African citizens was actually quite scary. Soon after the soldiers left, Xhosa died. The injuries sustained from the assault had been fatal. According to his family and other witnesses whose claims were not challenged by the security forces in their papers before court, the assaults followed the discovery by the security forces of a half-drunk beer next to a chair in Xhosa's yard and a single beer in his fridge. So they actually beat him up in his backyard. Now, I had seen this video and it's quite scary to know that they would enter your property. Not only enter your property, they entered his home and went and looked inside his fridge. And on this, I will still do a video on the city of Cape Town, the DA-run city of Cape Town, planning to enforce or try to enforce bylaws that would allow any enabled or authorized security officer to enter your house without any search warrant, to enter your car without any search warrant, and just search. Well, it looks like the security forces are already applying these rules, although there's no rules in our law or constitution that actually allows this at all. But the decision of Judge Hans Fabricius, handed down in the Gauteng High Court on 15th of May 2020, in a case brought by the Xhosa family and their neighbours, means there are other winners apart from the named applicants. Constitutionalism and the Bill of Rights have both been given new life by the strongly worded decision, and it's reminded to everyone in South Africa of the standards of behaviour required of us or the government, the security forces, and the people. At this stage, only the people have been asked to comply. The security forces have run rampant, done whatever they wanted to. They have not received training to actually deal with the public under these conditions. None of them have received training. And it's actually a huge concern that security forces, and especially the military that have been trained for war, have been let loose amongst public to enforce lockdown regulations that are unconstitutional. And I will soon go through the actual judgment so that you can actually hear, and I will also attach this judgment at the bottom of the description for the video so that you can read it yourself, that shows that we are still a country bound by constitution and law that is supposed to uphold that constitution. One thing that is significant, in particular the people of South Africa treated so shoddily over many weeks of lockdown, may also count this as a significant victory. The court's strong restatement of the rights of the people puts the state authorities and the security establishment on terms to act within the bounds of the social contract embodied in the Constitution, like I've said numerous times before. And if you want to watch my other videos, please subscribe to my channel. If you want to get notifications on new videos, then click the bell button. When you subscribe, you will not receive notifications. You will just get more of my videos in your news feed that you can then click on. So subscribing won't spam you at all. If you hit the bell button, then you will receive those notifications, and that's only if you choose so. Many reports of the judgment have highlighted that soldiers who were involved in the fatal assault of Xhosa over the Easter weekend are to be suspended on full pay while a proper investigation takes place. True, but the judgment goes far beyond this particular case, and even the particular soldiers and their leaders. It sees Fabricius, who is a judge in this case, setting things straight and restating what should be the reality of our lives. SA is a constitutional democracy, he points out, and that means the government has to behave in a way that is respectful of the people and their rights. Now, I'm not going to carry on with the rest of the article. You can read it. Like I said, I will put the link in the description underneath this video. I want to actually go to what the judge said, and I will provide a link to this court judgment for you so that you can read it yourself. The headline reads, "What orders did the court issue in the case brought by the family of Collins Xhosa?" The court made a number of declarations of principle that must continue to operate even during the state of disaster caused by the lockdown and other steps taken by the government to curb the spread of COVID-19. Now, COVID-19 cannot spread, as I've said before. The SARS-CoV-2 virus can spread. COVID-19 is the disease that develops due to the SARS-CoV-2 virus. It also issued several orders about what the security forces and their leaders, and this is important, and I want you to listen to that clearly. Listen for what he says with regards to the leaders specifically, including the Minister of Police and Defence, must do in relation to the lockdown and the behavior of the security forces during this time. So keep this in mind if you see any further infringements. Further, the court gave strict deadlines for complying with these orders. So the court actually said by when the ministers need to comply with these orders. Now, this is very good news. The fact that we know that our courts can be used to take these actions. And the one question I have in my mind, why have the opposition parties in parliament that stood next to President Cyril Ramaphosa when the lockdown started, when he extended the lockdown, why have they not taken this to court sooner? Why did they only do this later? Why are the court cases only piling up now? What has happened to the citizens of this country to just stand back and take all this abuse? The court declared the following. 1. That during and despite the state of disaster, everyone in SA was entitled to the following rights, among others, as these are non-derogable even during states of emergency. Not the state of disaster that we're in. If a state of emergency is declared, these are still applying. The right to dignity, the right to life, the right not to be tortured in any way, the right not to be treated or punished in a way that is cruel, inhuman, or degrading. Remember this, we are currently in a state of disaster, not a state of emergency. These, the court declared, should still apply during a state of emergency. Number 2, that South Africa's security forces must act and must instruct their members to act in accordance with the Constitution and the law, including customary international law and international agreements that are binding on the Republic. Now, we know that we have signed many international agreements after the Second World War that says how you engage even during times of war. And certainly, with regards to the military and the police, it's been very much like a war zone out there. Number 3, that the security forces and their leaders were obliged to respect and promote the rights in the Bill of Rights. So they are supposed to promote these rights, both these ministers. That members of the security forces are bound to use only the minimum force that is reasonable to perform an official duty. Number 5, that members of the security forces and the leaders are bound by domestic and international law prohibitions on torture and cruel or degrading punishment. Now, we've all seen people being treated like some people that is in some kind of a voluntary bush camp or on some voluntary training camp doing push-ups and sit-ups and rolling down hills and all sorts of things that happened to us in the military back in the day when conscription still happened. But they've been doing this to members of the public, and this is not a time of war. In addition to these general declarations, the court also ordered that the security force authority shall, within 5 days, suspend all members of the defence force who were at or near the Xhosa house on 10th of April, pending the outcome of disciplinary proceedings. That within 2 days, all members of the security forces will be commanded by the respective leaders to adhere to the absolute prohibition on torture and cruel and degrading punishment or treatment, and to apply only minimum reasonable force to enforce the law. That within 5 days, all members of the security forces must be warned that failure by individuals within the ranks to report or prevent acts of torture or cruel or degrading treatments could lead to criminal, civil, or disciplinary action against those who fail to act, to stop or report this behavior. That the authorities have 7 days to lodge affidavits with the court confirming that all the above has been carried out. So they have 5 days to carry it out, and then it's 7 days for them to actually submit to the court that they have carried out these actions, so a further 2 days. On the question of behavioral guidelines and a code of conduct for the security forces, the court ordered that the authorities have 5 days to develop and publish a code of conduct and operational procedures to regulate the conduct of the security forces during the state of disaster. I can't believe they haven't done this to begin with. Remember the speech that Cyril Ramaphosa gave in a military uniform as Commander-in-Chief. That the authorities publish details of when the use of force may be allowed, along with guidelines about how the security forces may enforce the lockdown regulations, social distancing, and other regulations during the state of disaster, when arrests are permissible, and what other methods may be used to ensure attendance at trial. So at this stage, many people have not been allowed to attend trials, to actually witness what is happening within a court of law. And that is obviously against any kind of democracy. That details are given about where members of the public may lodge complaints against the security forces, and that affidavits are lodged with the courts confirming that all this has been done. To ensure that the public knows of these behavioral guidelines and the code of conduct, the court orders that the following be done. That within 5 days, the authorities must establish a mechanism for civilians to report allegations of torture or degrading treatment against the security forces during the state of disaster. The authorities must also publicize information about this mechanism throughout South Africa in all official languages via television, radio, and digital media. So this is almost due, and I will do an article on whether they've actually complied with this or not. that the Minister of Defence and the Minister of Police must ensure that the internal investigation into the treatment of Xhosa and anyone else whose rights may have been so far reported as infringed by the security forces during the state of disaster are completed and reported onto the court by the 4th of June, with copies given to the Xhosa family legal team. So if any of you have been violated during this time, you should actually register those violations with the means that will be provided, report them, and then the ministers have to report this to the court. I want the people of South Africa to realize what the Constitution means, what constitutional rights mean, what the Bill of Rights mean. And I want you to understand that when our government is going beyond what they are allowed to do, that the courts are currently there to protect us. This case proves this. We should make use of the courts to actually stop our government from the tyranny that they have unleashed on us.